Good morning, everyone. Ooh, that feels loud. I'm so sorry. Higher? Oh, perfect. Okay. Thank you for letting me know. My name is Carolyn, Thickett, and I'm with the Escarpment Corridor Alliance. I'm the Conservation Director, and I've been with the organization just for about 7 months now. So fairly new in my role, and I'm really excited to be sort of leading the work as a new land trust for the community. Thank you for coming to our session today. I'm going to try not to be nervous, but I'm sure you can see the microphone shaking in my hand here. We have some wonderful gentlemen up here that are going to share their expertise about how their land trusts work and how different projects across the landscape, how we collaborate across different land trusts. It's a really great community, this particular sort of sector, I guess we can call it. Before we get started, I'm going to invite up a friend. And this friend is a community member, just like all of you. He is a landholder in this area, and I use the word landholder very specifically as opposed to landowner, because we do hold title to the land. We do not own the land. So he is a local landholder, and he is a great observer and lover of nature. And he's got some really great stories. He's going to share, he's got lots of actually really great stories. We're going to kick them off after a few minutes. But he's going to share us a little bit about his thoughts on nature, on land stewardship, and their family's perspective on how we manage the land together.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you. I'm very glad I'm at the beginning, so I can't fail as badly if I was at the end. My name is Al Stewart. Is this?
It's good.
Thank you. My wife said I had to bring my water up here, but I'm going to spill it for sure. Anyway, my name is Al Stewart. For some of you, if any of you are members of Osler, I was a long-time member of Osler and been in this area for many years. I'm in my late 60s now. My father bought our family farm property, which is about 10 miles east of here at Metcalf Rock, back in the late 60s, around 66, 67. And my parents had been married for about 20 years at the time, and almost 20 years, and 18 years or something, and they had searched all over Ontario to find land that had a whole lot of qualities that my father wanted to have for a farm, but he didn't want just a farm. He wanted to have agriculture, he wanted to have streams, he wanted to have forests, he wanted to have views, he wanted to have nature. He's a duck hunter, he's a fisherman, he also wanted to, and we converted our farm from a cattle farm to a sheep farm, so he wanted to lose money as well. But we ended up buying a number of properties that were amalgamated at the time, and we ended up with a little over 300 acres. And about half our land is forest and escarpment and wetlands, the other half is agriculture, farming and for growing hay and things like that. And I grew up in Toronto. We lived in Toronto, but we had a family that lived on our farm for many years and helped raise the sheep and do everything. And I spent my summers as a teenager and with my Toronto buddies and my younger brothers coming up here and working the land in terms of baling square bales and chasing sheep around and had an amazing life that I wish I could have for my kids, but that part's kind of gone. But I learned so much about farming and practicality and land, that side of it, but I also learned so much about the outdoors and being around the woods and watching and fish and things like that. And we are, our land has about a mile of Mill Creek running through, which runs down into the Beaver River. And one of the projects, two little things I want to mention. When I was a little boy, I did a project. I found a turkey vulture's nest in the escarpment that's on our land. And I took it with a friend, David Trussler from here, I think. And he and I found this nest, and we found 2 eggs in the nest. And my father was a member of a group that had bird sanctuary in Guelph. And I was in grade 5, I think, 10 years old. And we took this egg to the bird sanctuary, and they hatched it. And then my grade 5 class from Toronto came to the sanctuary. We saw this little turkey vulture that was white with a big white beak. And you would have no idea they're much more attractive up close when they're little and very cute. Anyway, now they look like me when they're old. But it was incredible to see that. And at the time, the record, I was told that there were only no one had ever seen more than 12 turkey vultures at a time. And turkey vultures vultures were kind of a cool thing to see, but not that common. And now you see turkey vultures all the time. So 20 years later, I was riding, we had set some more horses, and I was riding one of our horses up to our back field across Mill Creek, and there were 65 vultures all perched. It was like an episode out of an Alfred Hitchcock the bird thing. Kind of freaky, but you're on a horse, you can do things that you can't sometimes do if you're just even walking around. But I thought, wow, this is amazing, and I learned turkey vultures migrate and all this stuff, and now you see turkey vultures all the time. And I was talking to Carolyn about this a few weeks ago, and I don't know anything, I'm just a guy who watches stuff, but she knows stuff. And I said, is this a good thing to talk about? And she said, turkey vultures and more turkey vultures is a sign of a good, they're nature's garbage collector, and they are, and so the fact is more than means they're doing, because they have more garbage to clean, but it's a good sign anyway. So we all see turkey vultures now, and they're very cool birds. And what I wanted to also say quickly before I get to my main story is that last year my wife and I spotted a bald eagle on a hydro pole as we were driving up the 10th line into Clarksburg. And it was a year ago March, and it was up there eating remains of a rabbit or something, but it was the coolest thing. And I've been here for almost 60 years. I'd never seen an eagle here. And it was just an amazing thing to kind of finally see something that I thought I'd spotted, and there they are. And I got a little video of it that one day I'll show people. But it's just a sign that there are things being done that are bringing the world into a better place, and the people here and what the ECA is doing is just a fantastic step in bringing people together to help get this world back to where it should be. So I was saying as a little boy, there was all the stories about Vietnam and DDT, and there were no eagles around. Eagles' eggs were too thin, and now eagles are coming back. It's just a positive sign in a world that doesn't have a lot of positive signs sometimes. But I'll tell a quick story. Our river, Mill Creek, runs down into the Beaver River. When I was a young guy, there was no fish ladder at Thornbury at the Beaver Dam on 26 at the Beaver River Dam. And there were people from the Ministry of Natural Resources who used to have long nets, and they would capture the trout and raise them up because they didn't have a way of getting up in the river. And then the ministry built the fish ladder, and then I'm sure many of you have seen the fish ladder. It's a really amazing thing. They seem to make the fish work very hard for a long time to get there, but I guess it's a bit of Darwinism there. But anyway, anyway, they're working harder for their girls than I would. But anyway, in the late 80s, fish, I was told, were species that liked to go back to where they were born. And for 3 years at the end of the 1980s, I was collecting trout with the help of the Ministry of Natural Resources, trout eggs that they were measuring all the trout that were going up the dam, and they tagged them all. And it was incredible that the money was being put into tagging these fish, tracking those stuff, and to help the fish get reestablished up in Mill Creek. We were stripping the female eggs of their eggs, stripping the male eggs of their magic, and then mixing it up in pots with the Ministry of Natural Resources. And we had a thing called an upwelling box, which is like sort of the size of a giant couch, which had a lot of channels in it with boxes in it with water running through it. And we laid the eggs through all these little stones, and then for 6 weeks I monitored them in clean filters and things, and we hatched all these fish into and released them back into the river on our farm. There's a waterfall on our farm. They can't get up the waterfall, but from there, we probably put 300,000 fish into the river over a 3-year period. And I have no idea whether those fish survive, but the idea is that fish would return home to where they came from. And the idea is that these fish would think they were born there. And it was just a wonderful thing. I was in my late 20s, and my father was thrilled we were doing this, and he was an environmentalist before it became cool to be an environmentalist, and so he was an original and really a great guy to learn from and help develop it. But I've always been concerned about whether our river, the Mill Creek, was too warm for fish, and the issues that go there. And I was talking with Carolyn about this. She said, well, you left the trees overhanging, and I said, yes, and there are too many pools perhaps where water warms up. But it was just, I've always felt that we could do more with the river, and we should do more with the river. And here we are 60 years later almost. We have this property, and I haven't put fish in it for a while in the river, but I hope that we will find ways for the river to be better for the fish. And we want to work with our land, with the ECA and organizations like the ECA that are across the province, but in our particular place with the ECA to help develop that stream so that the fish will will survive and be in it, and the water will be cooler and all that kind of stuff. Just to help the world become back where it should be. And I'm encouraged by vultures and eagles and lots of fish. So anyway,
inspiring, being able to have such a deep connection with the land for so long. So thank you very much for joining us and for speaking with us. Thank you very much. So as we sort of get started here, I'm going to read out some bios for the two gentlemen that are the two experts that are leading our panel today. So Michael McDonald is a proud graduate of McMaster University. He has earned a Master Naturalist Certificate from Lakehead University. In addition to his early volunteer efforts for the Bruce Trail Conservancy, Michael was one of the founding members of the Hamilton-Burlington Trails Foundation. He previously sat on the board of the Ontario Trails Council as well. He currently sits on the board of the Ontario Land Trust Alliance and is a recipient of the King Charles III Coronation Medal. Michael formerly achieved rank of private in the Canadian Armed Forces and the Reserves and is a certified hike leader in Ontario. Michael is a lover of nature and deeply values people's personal connections to natural environments. I left out the part about the Bruce Trail Conservancy because you're going to be talking about that. Okay, and we're short on time because there's lots of stuff to cover. Mike Hendren is also joining us today. He spent 20 years in the conservation sector, including first as a real estate appraiser and later as a consultant negotiating acquisitions for clients like the Bruce Trail Conservancy, Ducks Unlimited, and Credit Valley Conservation. He has held leadership roles including Executive Director of the Martha Land Trust for 9 years, Chair of the Ontario Land Trust Alliance, and Vice President of the Ontario Region at the Nature Conservancy of Canada. He's a registered urban and regional planner in Ontario with a master's degree in planning from Queen's University and a business degree from Trent University. Mike is an amateur musician, which I don't think I knew that. Amateur. And an avid outdoor enthusiast, but more than anything, he just simply likes to get things done. These are gentlemen that are going to be leading our session for today. I'm going to hand it over to Michael first.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. And Al, I don't think you finished your story about raising the turkey vulture. What do they taste like? Okay, it's the wrong crowd for that.
just carry on.
Carry on. That's gross. Good job. Okay, well done. Welcome everybody. My name is Michael McDonald. I'm the CEO of the Bruce Trail Conservancy. I'm going to talk a little bit about what is a land trust, but I'm going to use the Bruce Trail Conservancy as a small example of one of over 50 that are out there in Ontario. And we're a little bit unique in that we have a hybrid sort of recreational component to our work. But so you hear about that. So how many people have heard about the Bruce Trail? Okay, amazing. And a lot of people.
The Bruce Trail goes to our land, and we're very glad it does.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. That's really kind. And I'm going to be talking about that. The Bruce Trail does cross the land of 630 different private landowners who graciously allow the connectivity of the trail and the connectivity of this ecological corridor. So what is a land trust? So land trusts are groups that come together to protect special places on the planet. And the one that we're working on is called the Niagara Escarpment, which you're all familiar with. So in the interest of time, I'm going to speed through that. But really back in the 1960s, it's the awakening of the environmental movement. Rachel Carson released the Silent Spring. We start to realize that humans are having major impacts on the environment. Along the Niagara Escarpment, quarries start to form. And the four founders decide that after a trip to the Appalachian that they want to build an amazing trail along the Niagara Escarpment, not for the purpose of building a great hiking trail, but for the goal that if people spend time in nature, they will fall in love with it, and if they fall in love with it, they'll want to protect it. So that's really been our mission. We have the world's greatest hiking trail, I believe, and I'm biased on that, and we can debate that later, but what we're really doing is protecting land around the Niagara Escarpment, and that's really our goal. So here's an article from the Financial Post from the 1960s. Can they save this urban wilderness? And I'm pleased to say that over 60 years later, we're at about 70.1% of the Bruce Trail ecological corridor permanently protected containing the Bruce Trail. So pretty amazing. So we'll get to that. Here is the Niagara Escarpment. The Bruce Trail follows that. And so you can see we really bisect a huge section of southern Ontario, and we're operating in a place where we're trying to protect land in highly urbanized populous places. We call it protecting near urban nature, and that's exciting to do. It's important to do because those are the lands that are most under threat for development. But more than that, this is where all the biodiversity is, and this is where the species are at risk. Top facts about the Bruce Trail: we're a wilderness footpath, 911 kilometers long. We've got 400 kilometers of side trails, 71.1% protected. Again, 625 handshakes with landholders who are, again, allowing the Bruce Trail. And that's really, really special because the connectivity of the trail is important for the movement of people, but it's also important for the movement of species, because we really do think of ourselves as a huge ecological corridor. We are entirely volunteer-led, and I know there's a few volunteers in the crowds, but volunteers, you really do make a difference for organizations, so here's an applause to you. And so right now we have about 18,000 acres under our care along the entire Niagara Escarpment, which again, on a landscape scale, doesn't maybe feel like a lot, but this is near urban nature, so every single one of those acres is really precious. So here's a little bit of our story, and this is again a common story for all land trusts. 1976, we protect our first property up, it's called the Young property in Beaver Valley, and 29 acres and 745 kilometers of the Bruce Trail, or excuse me, meters, thank you, Bruce. Former board member Bruce King in the audience just corrected me, thank you, Bruce. But again, sort of a really beautiful start, protecting our first place, and really, really great. Then we're going to fast forward almost to 1996. So quite a bit in the future, we're at 3 properties, and you can see them highlighted here. And then fast forward again into 2016, and we're up to 15 properties. And so I don't know if you can see it at the back, but all of the beige shaded areas are protected Bruce Trail nature preserves. And then here we are today in 2025. Look at this beautiful ecological connectivity that's happening here. And it's like a really important puzzle piece that we're putting together, but you can see over from 1976 to 2025, we really are making a difference in the Beaver Valley, but along the Niagara Escarpment holistically. So I saw you had your hand up. Do you have a
What do
question?
you mean by protected?
So one of the things that land trusts do is that they take land out of private ownership and bring it into our care. And so basically the Bruce Trail Conservancy owns those lands.
Is it by deed?
No, there's a few different tools that Mike's going to get into the mechanics of, but this is typically fee simple, where we will buy land from a landowner and bring it into permanent protection. And land trusts have standards that it's not enough just to protect the land, you also have to put money away into a reserve to make sure that that land is cared for in perpetuity. So when we purchase land or bring land into permanent protection, as we call it, we also put funds away so that those lands can be cared for forever, and that's really the goal. So once we own the land, we typically do a 3-season biophysical inventory. We catalog all the different species, all the ecological zones, all the ecological properties. We write a land management plan for that property, and then we enact on that plan. And I'll say, in the past, we traditionally used Western science to do this, but at the Bruce Trail Conservancy, now we're adding in Indigenous knowledge to our land management plans and trying to braid, or as we call it, two-eyed seeing, and that's an important part of our work. So once we own the land, we have lots of conservation and restoration work that we do to try and make those lands more ecologically productive. And typically, some of the lands that we're buying need a lot of help to get back to peak ecological health. So that's a whole part of the work that all land trusts do. And then again, we're unique in that we have the Bruce Trail to maintain, and again, all maintained by volunteers, and such an important and proud part of our history. We do tons of work to mitigate the impact of invasive species, again, thinking about what needs to happen on the lands. And we've got over 100 boot brush stations right now out there, and the science is actually a little bit out as to how effective they are, because it depends on how well you scrub your boots. But they're really also important for public education, people realizing that humans can be vectors for transmitting invasive species into natural areas. We also have something that we call is our landowner stewardship program, and this is something we're really proud of. We don't own all of the land along the Niagara Escarpment, and I talked about the landholders, the landowners that own land. But what we'll do is we want to work with them to make the Niagara Escarpment more healthy ecologically. So we'll actually send an ecologist out to your private property. They'll catalog the species and write a stewardship plan for your private property. And we will use volunteers, or we'll work with volunteers, we don't use volunteers, we work with volunteers to help bring those plans to life. But again, holistically now we're making the Niagara Escarpment more healthy, and so really proud of that. We do lots of science and collaboration. Right now we're working with McMaster University to study the erosion rates along the Niagara Escarpment, and that's going to maybe inform the slope with which we build future trail. But more than that, that's going to help us understand the lands that we're helping to manage. And then one of the really great projects that we're doing right now is with the University of Guelph. It's called GRIP, the Gosling Research for Plant Preservation. And what we're doing is we're taking endangered species. They've developed a technology where they can, they basically freeze them, and then when they bring them back from to life, essentially, they then clone them, and they're breeding disease-resistant endangered species, and we're replanting those along the Niagara Escarpment. So, again, lots of land trusts are doing work like this, but we're literally helping to bring back species from the brink of extinction, and I think that's a proud part of the work of land trusts. So, I'm going to turn it over to Mike now, and then you'll hear about some of the mechanics, and great pleasure. Here you go, Mike.
One more slide here, Michael. Thank you, it's great. And the Brewster Conservancy and its current leadership is a very fine organization, and I've had significant growth. I don't know if Michael is being humble, but in the time he's been here the last 7 years, I've had an enormous upswing in results, which is a great thing. We need that now more than ever. And they are the largest land trust in Ontario by a fairly long margin. In terms of the number of properties and the revenue, so it's wonderful to see that. Similarly, I'd like to really just start by congratulating the ECA on this event. This is extraordinary. I mean, I've been in this work for a couple decades now, been to a lot of different sessions, lots of energy at different events, but the size and scale and commitment and diversity of people here that are interested in this is really heartening, and it gives me a great deal of optimism. So happy to share a few thoughts, and if if you're not understanding what I'm saying, feel free to put up your hand or whatever, interrupt me, and there's some time for Q&A. I have been doing this a while, and so in my mind it's obvious what I'm saying, but please interrupt me if it's not. I guess one thing I wanted to say, when it comes to kind of developing a land trust, there's tons of options, short and long term. Some of them have great tax benefits, and one thing I've seen in I think about 250 transactions now I've been directly involved in through multiple organizations across the province. There's a huge amount of flexibility, but it's really driven by your values. So if you're a landowner and if you're actually donating it, or depending even in the purchase scenario, it's really defined by the partners at the table. So there's lots of options, and there's a land trust option for you. I promise. There's one for you. It's out there. So just quickly, I was just going to talk about this new venture we've started in the last couple of years. We are a land trust like ECA. I should also congratulate ECA on getting amending its charitable status and becoming eligible to receive gifts of land. I think they just have done one of their first gifts of land recently. Maybe I don't want to be a spoiler, so maybe there's more on that coming later today. And so great to see that progress, and I know there's a number of others in discussion, and it's part of the mix, right? So there's the private land stewardship work, there's the policy type work that Bruce was mentioning today in terms of informing and working with the government to encourage more public land getting into formal conservation. But 90% of Southern Ontario is private land, right? And 90% of the biodiversity in Canada is in Southern Canada and similarly in Ontario, and that's where 90% of us live. So this is it's complex, but this is where we really need to have all kinds of different approaches. A group of us, a number of foundations, started this new venture called Ontario Conservation Accelerator a couple years ago. We give money and partner with groups like ECA, Bruce Trail on a lot of their work. We also receive gifts of land. There's parts of Ontario where there isn't a land trust, or where there is, they are still in the early days. So we've been a partner in a number of ventures. We own a bunch of lands, and we actually transfer it to other groups. We're doing some acquisitions as well. and transferring them into provincial parks. So I'll tell you a little bit more about this quickly. And really the need is, now is the time, right? Like the demographics in this country, it means the capital gains that people have actually accrued in lands that they own, that often the properties have gone up, if it's a second property, a family farm or a cottage or whatever, a hunt camp, the value's gone up way more than they ever imagined when they acquired it a couple decades ago, right? It's the average baby boomer. And so there's a huge capital gain that they're carrying, and there's a great opportunity actually to be exempt from that and make a gift and still have flexibility in terms of use. So now's the time. There's about 35 land trusts in Ontario, which is almost a third of, but I would say it's more like half of the activity across the country is happening here in Southern Ontario. Michael and I are both on the Land Trust Alliance board together. I think governments of all levels are increasingly looking more at urban spaces and provincial parks. We heard our Prime Minister making a commitment, which I'm going to be in Ottawa next week. We'll see when that commitment comes into action, but about new national parks and new urban provincial parks. And I was actually appointed earlier this year by the provincial government to chair something called the Urban Parks Working Group. We have a number of partners at the table, and we're going to be making recommendations by the end of this year to the government on different urban park opportunities to collaborate with the federal government as well. So it's part of the mix, and then I think there's just a huge demand for access to nature, and obviously COVID just kind of accelerated that. I don't think people really come back. They really kind of recommitted to a lifestyle that maybe they always wanted. And I think we're seeing that, and we're seeing that there's just not enough green space. I guess Ontario parks actually had their biggest year of all time last year, not in the COVID peak years, it was last year, and already the bookings for next year, they're anticipating it's going to go even more. So I don't know if anyone's tried to get a site at a campsite in Southern Ontario in the last 5 years, but it's getting to be nearly impossible. You got to be, have yourself. I do it with my wife and I are on our computers back to back, right, at 12:01. Okay, go. So it's there's a huge need. So here we are in this country. We think there should be endless abundance of spaces like this, but there's not, right? And affordability-wise, people can't afford to own their own kind of private nature areas. And just quickly again, our venture, we're trying to fill a gap in terms of capacity in the sector and also raise more money. Our initial year we had a couple million that we spent on about 50 projects with different land trusts across the province, and things have gone well. We've had a number of additional commitments, and we're looking at more like 10 million now this year. So we're going to be doing more with groups like ECA and Bruce Trail and more. I mentioned before, there's the urban parks, there's provincial parks expansions. Scouts Canada, for instance, it's been public, and we publicize our partnership is going to be selling most of their lands in Southern Ontario. They cannot afford this anymore. They have some of the infrastructure needs renewal, and so, but land trusts didn't exist when a lot of these Scouts camps were bought 40 or 50 years ago. Land trusts are the ideal partner, right? They can raise the money, buy some of the land, gives them money to reinvest in their infrastructure, and a whole new generation of Scouts that can emerge from this. So it's going to be about 30 million over 3 years, and about 25 different deals that we're putting together, and we have land trusts signed up to be our partners for most of those. Maybe I'll just jump into, I've already talked a little bit about this, so I think I'll just jump. So here's some questions that we heard that we thought we would attempt to answer. Carolyn put these together, so you can probably read them. I'm not going to read them out. We're going to attempt to answer those. If you have questions that's not here, you can ask it. Sorry, I'm flying a little too fast here. Good for time? The financial. So I'll probably focus a little bit on structure, financial benefits, what are the different options. Can my family still access the property if I do something? Good. We can always go back to this.
Is the slideshow available after, and then we don't have to worry about it?
Yes, absolutely. We have recordings as well, so you can watch the full session, but we can make the slideshow available. Yeah.
Great. So we've already talked about what is a land trust. So in Canada, in Ontario, they are incorporated entities, and not-for-profit. There's now a Not-for-Profit Corporations Act in Canada, so I believe all land trusts in Ontario are operating as a not-for-profit. I believe all of them have charitable status, and they also have this special status called an ecological gift. It's in the Income Tax Act, and so if you give a piece of real estate that's deemed to be ecologically sensitive by Environment Canada, and you have to go through a process to get it deemed, then you are exempt from any capital gains on that disposition, on that donation. And you get beneficial tax benefits, including you have 10 years to claim the receipt. If you were to just give a piece of real estate to any other charity that's not an ecological gift, you actually have to pay capital gains. People are shocked by this. Like you can't, and there was a famous article in the 90s, you can't give it away. The other thing that happened is that there were a lot of people who owned U.S. Taxpayers and citizens who owned land in Canada, right? A lot of U.S. families came up here or moved, and so they couldn't get any benefit, and they actually had to pay the capital gain. I just went through this as well as someone in the UK who was trying to, he's originally Canadian, but he's been in the UK a long time, he's a taxpayer, but he said, well, I'll just donate it, and I don't need the tax receipt, but it won't cost me anything, and I'm okay with that. So, well, actually, I'm sorry to tell you, it is going to cost you something. You will still have to pay the capital gains in Canada, and this is a uniquely Canadian thing. But in '96, around the time that a number of charities in Canada went to Ottawa and said we need to have gifts of securities be capital gains free. Has anyone ever gifted securities to a charity? Capital gains exempt. So the land trust community, which was quite nascent at the time, did get together and go to Ottawa and say, government, you should be doing this for, not all gifts of real estate, because it could get a little out of control, but where they're truly ecologically significant. And there's criteria, and it's actually certified by Environment Canada. There's an appraisal review process, and everything gets signed off on. And the good news there is that you're not going to get audited later and asked how does this come to bear. And so it's meant, and we have a little chart, I think. I'll just maybe go here. It shows you in '96 when they started the program, which is the bar there, and what was happening annually, and then how it's gone since. There's actually been 831 ecological gifts in Ontario since. And so in '96, though, there was still a partial capital gain. In 2006, they actually brought it down to 0. So it really only been barely 20 years with this program. Similarly, they did in the US with the IRS code in the early 80s. So what you see in the US, I've gone to the Land Trust Alliance rally in the US, regional land trusts are huge. I mean, they have 30 staff, they have a $50 million endowment, they have 100 properties. And a lot of the US is even more heavily private land. It kind of reflects Southern Ontario's landscape. But that sector has grown a lot more in that area. It's in large part because the enabling legislation, if I can call it that. The other thing that happened was in 2010, it was announced that if you are a US taxpayer, but you have land in Canada, and you give it, you're exempt from capital gains if it's certified as an ecological gift, and vice versa in the US. There's kind of a treaty. So that's helped. I know there's a number of land trusts in the room. Escarpment Biosphere Conservancy, I think someone from the Georgian Bay Land Trust is here. He's got his hat on, helps maybe some others. There's been a fair bit of US ownership, and it's helped these gifts. So I'll just go back a little bit to the options. So what are the options? So Michael was talking about fee simple gifts of land. That's something that is kind of the most straightforward, right? So fee simple or deed. I think I heard the word deed, but I'm not a lawyer, but I think that's kind of the equivalent term. Would be one. Talked a little bit about the ecological gift program, and so donation of land. So you get a receipt. It can be exempt from capital gains, and then you have 10 years to use the receipt. Normally with a gift, now I think you only have 1 year, so they've actually extended the claim period, and you can split it with your common law or spouse, because some of these gifts are substantial, and even medium to high income earners can't use the receipt, so they extended the claim period. And I believe the third option is that you can use all of the receipt in one given year, so it's quite beneficial.
Is that, you've got 10 years of income tax, possible exemptions?
Correct, yeah, that's right. Some people refer to as tax credits.
Got it.
Yeah, so it's as if, yes, you have 10 years, because, again, these lands can be worth, you know, relatively a lot more, especially people are often making these decisions later in life. If they have kids, they've figured out where the kids fit in, right? So there's all these decisions, but so you now have 10 years to use it.
Yeah. How about estates? Can they use it?
Yes, the state can use it as well. And I'm not an expert on estate tax, but however, an estate can use a charitable receipt, it's equivalent, you just have 10 years now. Yeah. So that tells you a little bit about this special program that only exists in Canada. Like I've been to a couple conferences, the International Land Conference, and in the US, people say, oh my God, we need a program like this. And we don't have this. When you compare it to the process of getting a charitable receipt certified for anything else, I mean, it's a huge difference. And again, it kind of avoids the issue of getting audited later. So it's a really good program, and there's a cost. You know, you need to get an appraisal, you have to go through the process and the criteria, but you can work with a recipient agency like any land trust in Ontario to do this, and often get the appraisal paid for. So I talked about donation of land, and then we can go to the next one, what's called a split receipt. So again, you could actually come up with the value of the property, and perhaps you decided you're not able to donate it in full, even with these beneficial tax receipts, that you could, maybe it's a partial donation, maybe it's 50% of the value. In order to be eligible for an ecological gift, you have to donate at least 20% of the value. So a fair bit of flexibility there. And then I'll just kind of jump over to the bottom right, because my mind is thinking a little differently than how this is laid out, so pardon me. But the other option is what's called a conservation easement agreement. And so the easement is maybe a term you're familiar with, you know, a right in land, a right in somebody else's surface-like property. An easement is registered on title. It runs with the land even if it's sold or transferred, and it has certain rights are conveyed back to the recipient organization. So it could say an easement that confirms you can't subdivide the property anymore, or you can't agree to any aggregate extraction, or harvesting of trees can only be done through an approved forest management plan. And so there's all these different criteria, and it's quite lengthy, the different options you can put in there. And so you are giving rights in land, and that's worth something. And that can be certified as an ecological gift. So you can actually get a tax receipt for giving up rights in your property that you don't intend to go ahead with anyway. So for instance, if you have a 100-acre farm and it's eligible for a severance, you could give an easement that exempts that severance into the future, is held by the ECA or Bruce Trail or some other group, some other land trust. And in fact, not to go overcomplicated, but you could gift this to a conservation authority or a municipality. Governments are also eligible for ecological gifts, but we'll stay focused on land trust. Because I think they're the most willing and able, right? Clearly governments are conflicted with other things going on. And trustworthy. Yeah, trustworthy was the word used, not my word, but I heard it here. I don't disagree with it. Yeah, and I mean, the great thing, again, land trusts are not-for-profit, whose express purpose is conservation, they're charitable, and there's lots of checks and balances. And so the conservation easement agreement is a really good one. I think it's an excellent tool in this landscape, because, you know, it is settled. And people perhaps, you know, it's still a family product. Looking at you because of your great story, by the way. I love that, the way you told the story of your experiences there. But you can still keep private ownership, you can still transfer, you can still sell it, you can transfer it to your kids, whatever you want to do, but there's certain protections, and you can get the tax benefits for it now, and you can use those now. So a lot of people say, well, why wouldn't I do this? The challenge is finding a recipient organization that has, you know, that's willing and ready to do it. And as I said earlier, not all of Ontario has a land trust. Certainly not all of even Southern Ontario has an active land trust, and those that do, many of them are all volunteer. They're not very active, And so, you know, that's, I think the great thing that's happening in this area is you have several options and a really strong up-and-coming local option who I believe is willing to look at these. So now that they're eligible. So conservation easement is a great tool. I love conservation easements. I've put together a lot of those, and again, it gets appraised. So you've given up certain rights, that has a value, you get a tax fee, and it actually lowers your capital gains as well. So why wouldn't everybody do this? And I found when I get a chance to explain it to people, absolutely. And so we put together a lot of those deals. The other one, I'm now working, I'm going to work my way up from the bottom right to the next, life interest or a lease back. So one of the things you could do is you could donate an interest in land, or you can actually donate a piece of property, but retain a right to use it. And again, that can be appraised. What is that right worth? So I'm donating it, but I have the right to hike on it, or I have the right to hunt there for a period of time, and that has tax implications as well. In some cases, so you can actually extend it to your children, or it could be a perpetual right to lease the property. And again, it might work for everyone's different scenario. Question in the back?
Quick clarification question. Can I donate my land and then lease it so I have an income? Because a lot of the people that I talk with are older farmers who lived off a tiny income all their lives, and suddenly they own land that's worth 15 million. They need something from that land, and if they rent it out, that would be the profit they need as their retirement savings. Is that possible? Because those 80-year-old fellows don't want to hunt or...
Yeah, no, it is possible. So again, you can again, though, if there's an organization who wants to enter into that arrangement with you, right?
Okay.
Like you're talking about farming, there is the Ontario Farmland Trust that has been around for 15 or 20 years, and they are also in a growth trajectory. They're doing, I think they were 2 or 3 deals a year across the province, which isn't a lot in a big province, but I think they are suddenly ramping that up in the last year or so in particular. So the answer is yes.
You
Sorry,
you indicated you might reserve a right to hike on the land.
Absolutely.
Can
Yeah,
you,
and that's the easiest one.
Can you reserve a right to live on the land?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because these land trusts, most of them, their main purpose is conservation and complementary benefit, other activities like recreation. I mean, yeah, and I'm sure there may be particulars they want. You can hike on land, but only on these existing trails, right? Or on the trails or other ones, and you can actually create zones. You know, you've got on a map, and a map gets registered on the Title II, showing which zones are eligible for which. So you can, as I was saying at the beginning, you can tailor it to your interests, your needs, depending on where you're coming from. I think I've covered all of those things. Any questions? Barb?
Mike, just as a landowner who's done one of these conservation easements on the other side of Georgian Bay and been through the ecological gifts program and everything, I think it's important that you emphasize, if you're a landowner and you want to do a conservation easement, you retain ownership, full ownership. You retain control. You can design the easement how you want, as long as the conservation objectives are followed. So yeah, you can live on it, you can hike on it. It's not open to the public. It is your land. It continues to be your land. What you have done is say, this land is not open for development, and by when you do that, obviously the property is reduced in value, and you get this giant tax receipt you can use over 10 years. The difference of the value of your property being developable and not developable. And then the other thing that you might want to mention, which is my understanding, and the reason this is such a great tool for people who want to conserve their land but retain ownership and control and everything, and you know, it not being open to the public, is that municipal provincial governments can't go in and say, no, okay, now we're opening it up for, sorry, we're changing the rules. They can't do that, right? It's a very strong protection mechanism, much stronger than any kind of municipal or provincial zoning.
I'm so glad, and I've even been to your easement with you this year, so I can't believe I didn't think to point you out. But, so much.
And I'm gonna
well,
do another one, I own some property here and I'll be doing
Oh,
another
yeah,
one.
commitment right here. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm wondering whether, I've got two questions actually. The first one is, have any land trusts structurally failed?
Yes.
And what happens then to the lands that they
Great
have?
question. I figured that was coming. Okay, so there was one example in BC about 15 years ago, and unfortunately got shared very publicly. There was an article in Cottage Life about 10, 12 years ago about it. Yeah, so Michael had mentioned this earlier. The Canadian Land Trust and Land Standards and Practices, which all the members of the Ontario Land Trust Alliance have agreed to, is you have a proper stewardship plan, including stewardship funds set aside in a separate fund to cover the costs in perpetuity. All of these trusts, and some more than others, have a great volunteer base that help cover those costs. But there was a land trust in BC during the economic meltdown 2007-2008 who was very ambitious and buying property and even taking on mortgages. And unfortunately, they did go into receivership, I think is the term, and actually some other land trusts stepped up and took their assets, because once they donated to a charity, there's, again, I'm not a charitable law expert here, but there is a whole series of acts, provincially and federally, that those lands have to go to a compatible conservation organization. They can't go on the open market in a dissolution process. So I think nothing is for sure. I mean, a few months ago we were being told we were going to be part of another country soon. Things can happen in the world. We could, a crater, we could suddenly have something from outer space hit our planet. But I think this is one of the, to my knowledge, the strongest tool for conservation. There's a number of checks and balances in place. So those are questions you want to ask if you're good at looking at talking about land trusts. Do you have an adequate fund? And well, there are land trusts out there that are a little lean on their funds in Ontario. And it's something we're in our venture trying to ramp up and have a higher. We believe 20% of the fair market value of any property is a standard that should be met as a minimum. There have been trusts who have been doing less, and it's meaning they're able to do less stewardship on some of their lands. Beth Gillespie, who is the executive director of the Escarpment Biosphere Conservancy, has a question.
Thanks, Mike. So we have, our organization's been around for a while. I have been with it for a shorter time, and before that I was Mike's predecessor to Bruce Trail Conservancy. So our organization has 70 conservation easement agreements. I think we might have more than any other organization in Canada, or at least in Ontario anyway. And they are amazing instruments. As we've just discussed, they allow the landowner to live on the land. There are restrictions placed around the property. The really important thing about that is that they go on title, and I don't know that this was mentioned. They actually go on title, and they run with title to the property. So when you decide to leave your property or sell it to somebody else, the next person along has to follow the same restrictions. And that's really, really important. Unfortunately, they don't always do that. And that's the challenge we face as a land trust with all these easements, that we have to monitor them very, very carefully. And we're working to step up into that role. I'd also say about land trusts failing, one of the requirements of getting an eco-gift and one of the best practices around land trusts is that you have a dissolution policy. What happens to your lands when the organization needs to disband? And so one of the requirements, if you have an eco-gifts property, it has to go to an eco-gifts eligible organization. So there's a lot of checks and balances there, but as this lady was saying, it's a very robust instrument and can be very, very powerful, and it runs on title. It's a legal agreement, and there are quite fierce penalties from eco-gifts if you allow that easement to be violated, as well as from the provincial government. So I just thought I'd add that as
Great.
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so that I mentioned it, but we covered a lot of things, so it's great that you emphasized. Yes.
This is just such a wonderful concept for passive activism, to be a landowner part of a trust, and I really like that idea. But I'm curious, what sort of powers and protections would a landowner have if they've been established themselves with a trust? What sort of protections and powers would they have in terms of municipal or provincial bylaws?
I'll take a shot at it. So I think, I'm not sure if you're talking specifically about conservation easements.
No, I'm not,
You're not.
no.
So you're just asking if land comes into ownership of a land trust,
Yeah.
what tools do
Protection,
we have
yeah.
if the province or the municipality wants to do something? So, yeah, I think one of the painful lessons that we're learning right now is that governments can change their mind. And so, in my view, bringing land into ownership of land trusts is a really safe way to protect it because it's beyond sort of the grasp of government. For us at the Bruce Conservancy, we operate within the Niagara Escarpment, and there's a Niagara Escarpment plan that has sort of strict rules for how development can happen and so on and so forth. But truthfully, that legislation can be changed. So I think bringing the land into permanent protection with the land trust is a really important way to do it.
And I would say, expropriation is something the government can do, even to a land trust. However, and they can also approve developments you may not like, but not on a land trust land because they're the private landowners. But expropriation would be the exception. However, there has been a couple of examples where land trusts have proven to be, a great partner. And there's an example east of Aurelia, the Couchiching Conservancy had a gun range being approved next door to one of their nature reserves. Well, the average person would have trouble kind of mounting a large public fight against that, but the Couchiching Conservancy, a large long-standing group, was able to, and they publicly got the decision by the local government turned around, and in fact, in the end, they ended up raising money from the local community and buying the property and putting it into conservation. So I think, it's kind of strength in size, right, in numbers. I don't know who had their hand up first, I'm sorry. There's this gentleman, yeah.
I'm wondering whether land trusts are more interested in lands that are geographically related to other lands held by the land trust in that area. Are they less interested in geographically isolated bits of land that are remote from other areas?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly, because most of the land trusts in Ontario have a biodiversity conservation first agenda, connected corridors, like we're talking about here, is better, right? Bigger is better, wildlife moves through corridors, and so generally yes, but I think it's all on a case-by-case basis. Obviously, Bruce Trail Conservancy has their preferred corridor along the trail route, so it's a case-by-case basis and worth asking the question.
If property is already protected by the Niagara Escarpment Commission, is it necessary or advantageous to get into one of these programs?
I think it's a great stacking of options, right? So again, Niagara Escarpment Commission is a government entity or an M&R, could be changed through legislation. The other thing is that these land trusts bring in all kinds of charitable dollars and volunteers and expertise on land management. So, I think it adds, depending on the case, it can add a lot of extra benefit to the landscape. Yeah, I think it's still the best option, and it's great to have multiple options on there. I'm losing track of who. Go ahead. You haven't spoken yet, so.
Quick question, and I want to make sure I heard you right. Is an easement considered a severance?
No.
Oh, I thought you
No, it's a right, it's a right on land, and you don't have to go through a severance process.
Okay,
Yeah.
and it doesn't, if you've been severed, you're not precluded from an easement?
Correct. And what I said about severances and easements is you could put in your easement that the land cannot be severed. That could be one of the conditions. And that's worth often, development value is often high, so that can be worth a lot. I've seen easements that can be worth like 75% of the value of the total property. So you still get to keep the property, use it the way you would, entrench your own vision for it, and get a tax benefit. But some the people will say, well, I'm not sure, so my kids are, I want to have ultimate flexibility, which is why I find this might be a popular one. People wait very late in life to make these decisions, and sometimes that can be quite tricky because they're having health issues and there's a big scramble. So I encourage anyone thinking about this, start the conversation now. Don't wait. Yes.
I wanted to ask you
about the Conservation Accelerator, that's the group.
Yeah.
What is that, what do you do, actually?
So my wife asked me this all the time. So my parents.
Are you a broker, are you
Yeah,
an
no.
educator, are you a facilitator?
We're definitely not a broker, and
Okay.
we're not on commission. We're a private charitable foundation who acts as a land trust where there aren't land trusts in Ontario.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and we also partner with primarily junior groups on trying to bring them up. And then sometimes, if there's something we can help with, we even help with the Bruce Trail Conservancy on special projects. So we're actually, one of the things we're doing is we've got a loan fund set up now. So we've just loaned some money to the Kawartha Land Trust, for instance, about $350,000 to close a deal. That was the only way they were able to get the deal against several other private bidders was to close it super fast. And they're a really mature big land trust.
You've been cut off.
They're a large, successful land trust, but they couldn't raise $1.5 million in 6 weeks, and it was a cash flow thing. So we're loaning them. So basically, any tools that are needed to make conservation happen and make it happen faster, we're there. And Jill, who works with me, may have a comment on all that.
Hi, I'm Jill, I work with Mike. I was just going to say that one of the really neat things about the OCA is that our funders have said we don't need to be on title. So we are a land trust, we could be on title, we might own land if that makes sense, but we also actively work with land trusts right across Ontario to help them take on bigger deals, move faster, and our funders have said if you are accelerating conservation in Ontario, great. So it really gives us the latitude to ask people about barriers, try and get rid of them, try some new things. We're pretty nimble, sort of like a conservation startup, if you will. But it's been pretty fun.
No, that's great. So I don't want to run too far into our lunch, and I know there's lots of great questions. Our lunch is about to be served, so I want to make sure we don't get stuck at the back of the line, as there's a lot of people there. And I'm sure you're hungry. What I do have for you is some handouts. If anybody's interested, I have a stack of them here. It's just those basics about some of those options that you can start to consider, you can consider with your family. And one of the questions that I also wanted to sort of mention that we didn't really get to was, why donate your land to the ECA versus the Bruce Trail versus the OCA versus the Osler Biosphere Conservancy? The reality is there's no reason. We work together. We have conversations with each other about, as organizations, about where we're doing conservation on the land, so that we're not trying to double up our efforts. Our conservation dollars are nonprofit dollars are those are really important for us to be doing the most effective work that we can. So we do that by taking that competition piece out of the puzzle, and we all work together. There might be, maybe you want to have a conversation with me about your land, and it's actually in the Bruce Trail's optimum route. I might send you over there to work with them. So it's a really collaborative sort of land trust community, and we do the same thing with the Osler Biosphere Conservancy. I think Beth is back there somewhere. But yeah, please feel free to ask any of us any questions, and we can help answer your questions and what works for you and your family. I'm just going to skip through all of these. I do want to share some really fun news. This is, Mike alluded to it earlier, it's not a done deal yet because we don't have all the funds. But this is our first securement project. It is a fee simple project. We will be on title for the land. We're working through the Ecological Gifts program for having it certified as ecologically sensitive land. And it's gorgeous, it's perfect escarpment area. It's in the Colpore Uplands area. It's protected on 3 sides by proposed new expansion of provincial parks. Well, actually conservation reserves in this area. So it really provides a great opportunity for improved connectivity. Some pictures from the property here. You can see the escarpment sort of jutting out on the right here. And that's just me and this is how I look in the field.
How many acres?
I'm taking notes.
How many acres?
It's 24 acres. So our first property. that puzzle is important for building that picture. So I wanted to share that with you. We are hoping that people might be interested in supporting this part of our work. New as a land trust, and this is all new work for us, but we're really excited to be sharing that opportunity and yeah, to get involved with conservation. Again, there's me in the field. I have a little nook to sit in. It's a great spot there on the edge of a really steep cliff, though. I don't know. We are out of time for questions, but please connect with any of us that you've seen speaking today, including Bev. And yes, we will get you the slideshow, and we will get you the video recording as well, which will be available online. Thank you so much, everyone.